Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Very exciting video for you guys today. We are going to be talking all about cheek products. I'm talking bronzer, contour, highlighter, and blush. I get a lot of questions, and probably the questions I get from people personally in my life the most revolve around this topic. Do I bronze? Do I contour? Do I do both? Do I also do blush? And where do I place it? When should and shouldn't I highlight? I'm going to cover it all for you guys today. We're going to get into some tips and tricks I have. We'll do a little demonstration on my face of kind of the before and after of what color can do for your face: bronzer, contour, blush, and highlighter. And then I'm going to give you guys some recommendations at the end. So this is going to be a very all-inclusive cheek product video. Let's call it the sandals of cheek videos. I think it's going to be fantastic. But before we get into it, I want to wish a special welcome to those of you that are new. Please subscribe to my channel before you leave and make sure notifications are turned on. And with that said, let's get started. All right, so the first disclaimer I want to make, this is obviously just my experience, my opinion. There are no definite rules in makeup, as I feel like we all know. And what works for me may not work for you, but there are some things that I've definitely learned along the way when it comes to cheek color and kind of what to avoid and what to not do, what to do and where to put things. Also, we will be talking a little bit about tools in this video, specifically brushes. I do apply most of my cheek products with a brush. In fact, all of my cheek products with a brush 99% of the time. However, I think the most important tool that you can have is a sponge. This one actually is dirty, and I like them dirty. Like after I've used my foundation or maybe just my concealer, I like to have a little bit of leftover product on my sponge, and I use this for blending things out, pressing things into the skin, and helping everything just blend and look seamless. If you watch a lot of my videos, you guys will know I often blend things out and go around the edges of things with my sponge that I use for my under eye concealer. And it is a life-saving tip. It can save you when you've over applied or when things just did not blend properly. This thing will save the day. As far as brushes go, I am not that particular with my brushes. I kind of rotate between brushes. There are certain brushes I do really love for my cream bronzers and cream blushes in particular. But other than that, I can get by with using something more angled or using something much larger and more fluffy. I don't think it matters as much. I think once you kind of get the hang of where to apply things and how to apply things, especially when you're working with powder, just something fluffy and loose is the best in my opinion. Okay, so let's start off with contour and bronzer. One of the questions that there's the most confusion around, or that I get a lot of questions from, and this was a question that I had for myself for a very long time: what is the difference between contour and bronzer? Do you do both, or do you do one or the other? How are they different? I consider contouring to be more for shaping your face and adding shadowing and sculpting to your cheeks, to your entire face. Really, you can contour anything. Whereas I consider bronzing to be just kind of adding warmth and color. Bronzing does also add a little bit of shape to your face, but that's not really its purpose. It's more for adding warmth and kind of a sun-kissed glow, whereas contouring is actually going to be like sculpting things out. Now, do you need to do both? I generally don't do both unless it's a special occasion. I will do a tiny bit of contouring and more bronzing. Now that said, a lot of this depends on the shape of your face. I am older and I have a very thin face, so I do not need to do a lot of contouring. Now I know that sounds like I am bragging. I'm actually not. I think that having too hollow of a face kind of makes you not age very well, which whatever. It is what it is. We're all going to be different in that way, but I don't need to do a lot of sculpting on my face because it's just going to make me look too skeletal. If you have a rounder face and you want to kind of shape things out, maybe make your face look a little bit more thin and trimmed, you can definitely do that with contouring more than bronzing. But for me personally, I do a tiny bit of contouring and a lot more bronzing. Now the one exception I would give to this, where I would favor contouring a little bit more than just in everyday life, is for pictures. If you're getting any sort of pictures taken, contouring can look really good in pictures. I feel like it takes a little bit more practice, a little bit more finesse. Bronzing is a little bit more forgiving in my opinion, but that's one thing to just consider. So I want to walk you guys through a couple of products that I like specifically for contouring. This is probably one of my favorite products to reach for when I do want to do a bit of contouring. This is from Physicians Formula. This is the Butter Bronzer and Contour Palette. This is the light version. So this shade right here works really well for me for contouring when I do want to do just a tiny bit of shaping, which I'll usually just do kind of in the outer little portion of my cheek hair, maybe on my temple, maybe a touch on my nose. But again, this is kind of more of a rare occasion for me. But I do love this palette. I actually like combining these two shades to get a really nice bronzer shade. It's super blendable. I also love the original Physicians Formula Butter Bronzer as more of a warming bronzer, but this is good for contouring if you have more light to fair skin. I also really like my Patrick Ta Cream and Powder Bronzer Duo in She's Sculpted. Now this is the cream product in here is what I like to use for contouring for me. It's not too ashy for me. It still is more on the warm side. I do also love the bronzer in here, by the way. Another one I really love to use as kind of a hybrid bronzer slash contour product is, oh, I just dug my nail into it, darn it. The Charlotte Tilbury Sun-Kissed Cream Bronzer Palette. I have the fair version. This is a beautiful shade that is, it leans a little bit cool, but it's not ashy in any way. It has a touch of warmth in it. Really great for adding some color and some shaping to your face. I love the formula of this one. I talk about it all the time. It is one of my very favorites. And even though it's super expensive, I think this thing is like $56. You get a ton of product in here, more than I think any other product that I have in this category. This will last me for a very long time. So let's start off with just a touch of contouring. Again, this is not something that I do every day, but I just want to demonstrate for you guys what I would do if I was going to do both. So I'm going to take this brush right here. It's just a dense, small brush that I have. This one, I don't even know if it's available anymore. It's from Moda Brushes. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of this on the tip of the brush. When I'm contouring, I really only like to apply it the very outer, basically like see where the corner of my eye is, from here back to my ear. Again, this might depend on the shape of your face. If you have a more round face, if you want to do more sculpting, you could probably bring it in a little further, but I would never go in further than kind of like this area right here. You want to leave this section of your cheek highlighted, or it's going to look completely unnatural. A good way to tell where to put it if you can't find your cheekbone is to kind of like suck in your cheeks and just apply it right in that hollow. And honestly, if you have a rounder face and you don't have a pronounced cheekbone, just put it halfway between your eye and the bottom of your jaw and kind of create your own little cheekbone there. This might take a little bit of trial and error, but it's really not as difficult as you might think. I'm not even too concerned about the blend on this because we are going to bronze on top. This is really just going to add a tiny bit of shape. If you really want to, go kind of pinch and go down the sides of your nose. And if you ever screw up or you feel like, oh my gosh, that looks crazy on me, take that handy dandy sponge that has a little bit of concealer on it, and you can use that to kind of blend that in, pull off the excess, and just make it look a lot more subtle. This definitely needs a little blending. You just tap back and forth, kind of wipe off your brush if you have too much product on there. Now I have a turtleneck on today, but you can do a little bit of contouring under your jawline. Again, I really only do that if I'm doing like getting pictures taken or something, or if I just kind of want to create a seamless blend between the color on my cheek and kind of down here. Sometimes I'll take the excess and pull it down along the side of my ear just so it doesn't look like I have a stripe on my cheek. It's just basically a tip for blending it out more than actually adding color down here. Okay, that's pretty much all I do for contouring if I do any contouring. Let's move on to bronzing. So a couple of bronzers that I really love. Now I have so many bronzers that I love. I know I'm gonna leave out a lot of names of bronzers that I would recommend and I have recommended in the past. I really could pull out my whole bronzer drawer and just tell you guys buy or try any one of these. They're amazing. But a couple that I'm loving right now. First off, my Physicians Formula Diamond Cream Bronzer. I've been raving about this one lately. I love the formula and color of this. It looks so good on my cheeks. It adds the perfect warmth to my light medium skin tone. It's absolutely lovely. Another one that I love, especially if you find it difficult to find a bronzer shade that doesn't turn you too orange, is from Flower Beauty. This is the Sunrise L1 Heatwave Bronzer. This is a beautiful, beautiful bronzer that has almost a berry undertone to it that keeps it from looking orange at all. It adds beautiful shape to your face, a touch of like a soft, rosy, warm glow, and it's a great formula if you have a lighter skin tone and you don't like orange tones or anything overly warm. This is my #1 recommendation. Another basic bronzer I really love is from Milani. This is their Silky Matte Sun-Kissed Bronzer. This one's in the shade 02, which is a good shade for those of you that have light medium skin tone. If you have very fair skin tone, you might want to try shade #1. That one was too light for me personally. Really good basic matte bronzer that I really love. A couple cream bronzers I love. I love the Merit Bronzer Stick in Clay. This one is fantastic, especially if you have a lighter skin tone. The Persona Mojave Bronzer is absolutely beautiful as well. So for today, since we already used a cream, let's do a powder. So let's jump over to my Milani Silky Matte Bronzer. Again, I'm not too picky with the brushes that I use. I have a very large bronzer brush. This is just like a basic, I love this brush. It's actually from Sydney Grace. It's her powder brush. This is such a good brush because it works really well for bronzer, but because it's kind of pointed, you can also use it for blush. And if you were in a real pinch and you only had this brush, if you just wipe it off in between, you could also even use the very tip of it for highlighter. So it's kind of a fantastic multi-purpose brush. We're gonna use it for my bronzer today. So I'm just gonna build up a good amount onto my brush. I like to tap off the excess. And then when I'm applying bronzer, I like to kind of start midway back and lightly tap on and then move forward and then move up and back. And you can slowly kind of work your way into like a larger circle. Again, you want to keep basically from the center of your eye back because we're going to put blush a little bit further in, and we want to leave this section right here highlighted. And if you screw up, that's what this thing is for. So don't be too stressed about not getting the placement just perfectly. So I basically put the majority of the product right there, and then I'll take the excess on my brush and kind of work it into my temples. You can kind of work it upwards to like the center of your forehead. Again, this will depend on the size of your forehead. I have a pretty small forehead, so I don't need to do a whole lot of shaping on my forehead. By the way, I love big foreheads. I have one son that has a larger forehead, and I love it. I used to do photography, and I loved little kids that had big foreheads. It's just, I don't know what it is. I just think it's super, I love the shape of like a bigger forehead. I think it's so cute. I know that sounded like kind of a weird thing to point out. Maybe it's just because I don't have a big forehead. You always love what you don't have. Same reason I love straight hair. And the placement of this one is going to be just slightly higher than where we placed the contour, but it's also kind of covering both areas. I'm getting the majority of it kind of slightly above the hollow of my cheek, but then some of it's getting a little bit below, some of it's getting a little bit up above. The placement of bronzer, it doesn't have to be quite as precise as a contour would be. You just want to make sure that it doesn't go all the way down to your chin to where you no longer have shape because there's just bronzer everywhere. You want to have a little bit of area showing right here where you have some of your natural skin tone showing right there, because that's kind of what creates the shape, and then some up above. And again, if you screw up, we will fix it with this. So after I've kind of gone up onto my temples and on my cheek, I like to take what's left on my brush. Sometimes, I don't always do this, but again, I think this is something that really helps to kind of just tie all your makeup together and tie the makeup from your face down to your body below. I am wearing a turtleneck today, which is maybe an oversight. I probably should have worn something different, but I will take my brush and kind of pinch it. There's hardly anything left on here, and I will run it kind of along my ear and just pull it down onto my neck and a little bit down below. There's not much color that's getting pulled down, but it's just gonna help kind of pull the tiniest hint of that color down that's going to just kind of make everything look like it's all just like one. Okay, so there it is. Now, if you do find that maybe you got too much or maybe it's a little bit too dark, you can go back to that handy dandy sponge. Mine is still slightly damp. It has a touch of concealer from before I started filming when I put my concealer on, and you can kind of just tap it around any edges that need to be blended out. If you have too much, maybe it's a little bit too strong, maybe you got too much product on your brush, you can just press it over the top of where you applied too much. It's going to simultaneously press it into the skin and pull off the excess and just make it look more natural. So there we have it. There is bronzer. Look at the difference. I feel like that makes such a big difference. I think bronzing just makes you look nice and healthy and sun-kissed, and especially as you get older and you find that it's difficult to go out in the sun to get like a normal tan that you used to be able to get when you were younger, which is true for me. I don't get tan anymore. I just get weird sunspots in weird places. So I have to shield my face from the sun when it's summertime. So adding bronzer kind of makes you look like you still get that healthy tan where the sun would naturally tan you without the damage that the sun can bring. We're gonna move on to blush. Now, you don't have to do blush. I know a lot of people that do one or the other. They only do blush and they don't do bronzer, or they only do bronzer and they don't do blush. Again, there are no rules. Just do what is comfortable for you. Try doing both if you've never tried doing both before, and then maybe try them individually and just kind of see what you like. Blush is one of those things that I think it comes down to more personal preference than anything. I personally am not particular on what types of blushes I like or that I think look good on me. I think a lot of it depends on what I'm wearing and what my eyeshadow was like that day. If I have like a very kind of pink toned eye, maybe a cool pink toned eye, I don't want to do anything too brown on the cheeks typically. I like my blush to kind of tie in to any sort of color or undertone that's going on my eyes, but it doesn't have to necessarily match. That said, I like all blushes. I like berry tones. I like peach tones. Honestly, there are really no rules. I think it's just what works for you. And I could not pick just a handful of favorite blushes. I love all of my blushes so much, and my blush collection is probably the largest collection. I have more blushes than perhaps anything else, with the exception maybe being eyeshadows. So just a couple that I really love that I am especially loving right now. You guys know I love my Two Reasons blush from Nabla. This one is soft nude. This shade is really growing on me. I love the warmer kind of nude tone of this one. Touch My Soul is my other favorite from them that's much more berry toned. I also love my Flower Beauty blushes. I just had these out for a video recently. They are gorgeous. They have a good amount of kind of tackiness and glow to them. So if you don't like something tacky or kind of greasy feeling on your cheeks, you may not like these, but I love a little bit of hydration on my cheeks. As for powder blushes that I love the MAC blushes. I think Essence makes some really good blushes. Persona makes some great blushes. Honestly, I'm leaving so many blush brands out. Find something relatively cheap. There are very few brands out there, in my opinion, these days that can really screw up a blush. So just find something affordable in kind of a basic nude shade for your skin tone and give it a try if you are new to blush. For me today, let's jump over to my Two Reasons blush. We're going to take, this is a cream blush, we're just gonna take the one on this side. So when it comes to blush, basically where we are going to apply it is a little further in than where we went with our bronzer and a little higher up, especially if you are a bit on the older side. I think the higher, you don't wanna go too high. I mean, there is a line here that might be hard to kind of define and depends on who you are, but if you go a little bit higher, it's gonna kind of give your face like a visual sort of facelift. So I like to just apply mine just kind of on like the high apple of my cheek. Again, we're just leaving this section here free of color. And again, don't stress too much. If you overdo it, or if you move your blush around too much, or it gets too widespread, because we can fix it with this afterwards. I like to keep most of the color right here in the center and then slowly work my way out with kind of the remaining color just to get a nice sort of blend. Do you see how nice and shapely and full of life that makes my cheeks? Oh, I just love a good blush. I think it does so many wonderful things for your face. By the way, this brush I always use for cream blushes. It's from Alter Ego. It is the perfect shape. It's a little bit loose, but it's also kind of stiff, but not like in a scratchy way. It just is kind of bouncy, so it works really good for just being able to lightly tap on your blush without having to kind of streak things or move things around. Doesn't mess with my coverage underneath. There we have it. All right, that looks great. If you do feel like you went up a little bit high, which I often do, I'll just take my little sponge here, just lightly dab around the edges. Again, if you got a little too much color, maybe the blush was more pigmented than you were anticipating, just take that sponge, kind of tap over the top. I don't really need to do that today, so I'm kind of just barely pretending, just kind of demonstrating for you guys. All right, so there we have blush. Again, you don't have to do both, but I do think there is something about the combination of like the warm brown and the blush on top. I think having them both together, there's something that just is extra special about it. No, you don't have to do it for every day. For a special occasion, I would definitely do both. That leaves us with highlighter. Where do you apply your highlighter? I think the easier question to answer, especially if you are over the age of say 35, 40, the easier question is where to avoid putting your highlighter. I think the most important thing with your highlighter, you do not want to get it close to, do you guys see my little smile lines right there? Don't get your highlighter up too high. You don't want it to go into these lines right here because it's going to emphasize those lines. It's going to look unnatural, but you also don't want to go too low. You kind of want it right in this area, right here on the top of your cheekbones. I usually go into about this part, just outside of where the inner part of my blush is. I don't like to go in too far because I do have some larger pores here that can be emphasized. Again, it's not a huge deal. That's what this little kind of eraser tool is for. If you get it in too far, you apply too much, but I generally like to stick it in this area Here, I sometimes like to add a little bit to my brow bone, avoiding this section right here where I have many, many fine lines. I know some people put it like up here. I rarely do that. I do like to put it on my nose. If you are very sensitive, you don't like to look like a disco ball, or you don't like anything too shimmery on your cheeks, you could avoid highlighter altogether. In fact, what you could do if you want to have the effect of a highlighter without the sheen of a highlighter, you could just go back in with a tiny bit of a lighter shade of concealer, just a tiny amount on a damp sponge, and kind of highlight like an area right here, maybe like this section right here, just to give some highlight to your face without the sparkliness or the shimmer. But I'm not afraid of a bit of shine. I love highlighter so much. There's just something about putting on a highlighter that just makes me happy. I feel like a fish looking at a lure. I just like to look at shiny things, and that includes my cheeks. So I'm gonna share with you guys a couple highlighters that I really love. There are a lot that I can mention. Probably the one for those of you that are a little bit more sensitive to anything overly sparkly or glittery or too reflective is the Laura Mercier. This is their Matte Radiance Baked Powder in Highlight 01. This is a very subtle, natural looking highlight that doesn't have too much sparkle or glitter in it. It's very refined, but it does give you a good highlight effect and a little bit of sheen as well. I also really like the Melt one. This one is a little bit more kind of metallic, but it's very refined. It's beautiful. This is their Stargazer highlighter in Digital Dust. It's a newer one to me, but I've been absolutely loving this for the last couple of months. A couple more intense highlighters that I really love are Max Double Gleam. This is a classic. If you like a very reflective highlight that's really going to like stand out, maybe if you have a date night or for pictures or something, this one is definitely going to stand out. It's a pretty intense highlighter, but I absolutely love it. It's really nice and refined. It's very nice and bright. I also love the Revlon Skin Lights highlighter. This is in the shade Daybreak Glimmer, one of my all-time favorites. You can see I'm almost hitting pan in this thing. Beautiful. And then the Essence, the highlighter in the shade number 1, Mesmerizing. I love shades 1, 2, and 3. This is the most reflective of the 3 that I've tried, but I think this formula is really fantastic. So let's go with the moderate highlighter today. This is Laura Mercier. The formula of this one actually reminds me just a little bit of Pure Nude, the original Pure Nude from Essence that's been around forever. It's just a little bit more pigmented in my opinion. As far as highlighting brushes go, you can use anything, just make sure it's smaller, or if you are using a larger brush, say you're just using your blush brush, make sure it has a nice tip on it and you only put it right on the tip, because you want to be a little bit more precise with your highlighter than you were with your blush or your bronzer. So I like to start just right here, kind of right on this very tippy top of my cheek. I'll kind of just tap it there and move it back and forth. See that subtle effect? I'll take what's left and kind of put a little bit on my brow bone. You can kind of move outwards and like tie those two together. I just generally don't do that because I end up getting some here on my fine lines, which I just like to avoid because that will emphasize a bit of that texture. And if you feel like, especially if you're using a more intense highlighter and you feel like it looks like a stripe, once again, our handy dandy little tool here can fix that. Basically, this is going to, especially if you kind of go around the edges of the highlighter you put down, a little bit above, it's going to both press it into your skin and pull off excess product. So it's perfectly blending the product into the rest of the makeup that you have down and pulling off any excess that might look too unnatural. So I cannot recommend something like this enough. It doesn't matter what kind it is. It's just a little Wet n Wild sponge. Now for the optional part, I like to go down the bridge of my nose just a little bit. I always put it on the tip of my nose, and then I usually end up like taking it off or like pressing it in, so it's just very, very subtle right there. I also like to go on my Cupid's bow, and sometimes I'll actually go onto my lips with my highlighter. I know it looks crazy right now, but I'll take my sponge, kind of tap it in, then maybe add a little bit more lip gloss. The shimmer from your highlighter can kind of be like a extra bit of sparkle in your lip gloss. Just adds a little bit more. Once again, just take a look. If you went in too far on your cheeks, just kind of tap it out very lightly. You can even, if you have a lot to cover, if you're worried about messing with your cheeks too much, you can even add a tiny bit of concealer to your damp sponge and just go kind of in this section right here. You just want to be careful that you don't get that actual concealer in too far to the products that you just put on, or you're gonna undo all of the good that you just did. You gotta keep it just around the edges if you're working with concealer, which is why I typically just kind of use my damp sponge and kind of what's left, but you can kind of just go over everything very lightly. Make sure we don't have any harsh lines between anything. Everything's just kind of blended together and seamless. All right, and here is the finished cheek. I'm gonna insert for you guys right here a little before and after shot so you can kind of see the difference with color on the cheeks, without. I think it makes a huge, huge difference. Even if I'm not wearing eye makeup, there's just something about like having some bronzer and some highlighter on or a bit of blush that adds some color and life to your face, which I think is so needed if you are over the age of 40. You kind of start to lose that naturally. So adding it back in is a huge, huge help. I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully I answered some of the questions that you might have had regarding contour and bronzer and blush and highlight. Whether you're someone that needs or wants to do all of the steps or just a few of them, I hope I gave you some direction on kind of what to do or where to go. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I had so much fun filming this one. I will link everything that I recommended or that I'm using on my face down below in case you guys are interested. But that is gonna do it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope that you guys are all doing well, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. So let's start with a demonstration of bronzering and bronzering? Did I just say bronzering? I hope I didn't say that earlier in the video. It's gonna ruin the video. I just like highlighter so much. I just enjoy putting it on. I don't necessarily think it like makes me look great. Why would you put something on that didn't make you look great? Why would you buy makeup that you don't need? There's another question we can't answer.